Good morning, everybody. Trying to fix my lighting here. I wanted to start a new video series. Thought I would do something every Monday morning, and we're going to play with our lighting so we can get it all right. But that's a little bit better. So this morning, I thought I would talk a little bit about our video series and what I was thinking about, and invite you to ask questions. And I'm happy to answer them here on our series. And also, I just thought it would be fun. I like this new format. I like being able to talk to everybody live. And so I sort of had this thought that we would do this every Monday morning, probably generally around 6. So I'm a little bit late today. But so today I thought I would talk about a couple of things. First, I get a lot of questions and probably some criticism about how do I get it all done? Like, how do I possibly give the lessons that I expect others to give to their kids, to mine, when I run this business that I run and we're as busy as we are? And here's how I do it. I have an awesome husband who's home with me all the time. And that wasn't always the case when our business was much smaller. He worked outside of the home, but now he's home, and we sort of trade off with our teaching. So like, for instance, this week he's going to teach. And next week I'll probably teach. And so we just sort of do that based on what our workload is. So, don't ever think that we're not doing it. Just because I don't put a ton of pictures of our kids' work online does not mean they're not doing a bunch of work. And it's really mostly because the reason why I don't get it online is because we get busy. So, I've got a lot of things that I need to put up from both Ellie and from Sam recently, and some stuff from Raya. So there's that question. The other thing I thought I would talk about this morning is teaching several children. That's a question that I get a lot, and I really think that if you follow the formula that I've followed with all of mine, that it won't be so hard. So we've had, the year that I had the most main lessons, I had 4 main lessons and a toddler, and a very high needs toddler. She's still high needs, and she's 5. So I had to get really good at planning, and I also had to get really good at rotating who was doing what. So once you have kids that are reading, then what you do is you have this school time reading sort of applies to your lesson. And when I do my planning of the year, I always sort of go through and make sure that we have those books, like, with every lesson block. And sometimes they get through them faster, and so I send them to personal reading instead. But I trade them off. So, I would send the older kids off to do their reading, and I would work with the youngest child first. So when Sarai gets me and gets time to do circle with me and her stories with me and gets a little drawing time, that only takes about 30 minutes. When she gets that, she is so much easier to work with. And it's always been that way. So if you've got, I would say, a 3, 4, 5-year-old, that is what and even a kindergartner, I would always do that first. Give them that bit of mom first, so that you can then say, okay, now it's Sam's turn, or now it's Ellie's turn. And because they've had you, that part is golden. So they may still hang around you. I mean, Soraya will either be playing with her own stuff, or she'll be at the table with us doing some drawing, or I have painting available for her all the time. And I'll talk about painting next week, sort of how I let her do her own thing. But doing her first gives me the opportunity then to be able to focus on everybody else. So after she's done, like the year that I did 4 main lessons, I just had to rotate which child had the most intensive main lesson that day. So, if you're looking at that year, I had toddler, kindergartner, 5th grader, 7th grader, 9th grader. And so Harry's was going to be the most intensive main lesson. So I let the 5th grader and the 7th grader continue to do the reading, and I brought the 9th grader in and got his stuff done. And then when he was done, they were usually done with their reading. So I would send one of them to sit next to us but do handwork. And that was because I had I'm remembering Jacob's handwork. He always needed me right there next to him. Even though he was really good at knitting and really good at crocheting, he still really felt better if I was there with him. So we sort of did that. We had him there next to us while I was doing, say, Ellie's main lesson. And then we swapped. And she could knit like anywhere without me. So we would swap, and she would go and do her thing, and then I would do Jacob's. So we rotated every child. Even now, Ellie's in 9th grade this year. So we're usually done by 2. When I had 4 main lessons, sometimes it went a little bit longer, but not generally. Generally, if we start on time, and those days we were starting earlier, we were probably starting closer to 8:30, and we still try to get a walk in. If that doesn't happen right before school, it's not such a big deal right now. I mean, Soraya needs it, so Dad will sometimes take her on a walk, or she'll play outside. But when I had boys that were crazy, we went on a walk, no matter what. I mean, I would rather sacrifice main lesson time than have kids bouncing off the walls. So that morning walk is really good to get that, sort of get that stuff that builds up overnight, the craziness. So if they're not being able to sit still through breakfast and you're already stressed out by breakfast, then I would say you get that breakfast in them and you get them out on a walk. And there have been times when I've just made breakfast burritos and we've walked with the food in our hand. And that was super helpful when they were, like I'm thinking about Harry and Jacob when they were like 6, 8, and 7 and 9, and oh goodness, let's see, 10 and 12. 12 and 14, they were crazy a lot, and so going on a walk was really helpful. When they were older, when they were like 12, 14, and they could go together, I would send them on a run. And that would actually give me time to work with Ellie if I needed to do something that was special for her. But sending them on a run together was like super easy to do, and they would just go around the block or to the corner and back a couple of times, and that served that purpose for that morning walk. And the morning walk that we do, when we do it, it's not a leisurely walk, so it's a fast walk. It's a walk to get all of the wiggles out so that you then have this, what I like to call pliable exhaustion, for them when they come back. And when they're more pliable and they're not so bouncy, it's so much easier to get stuff done. So that sort of has become the hallmark of one of the things that we do every day, because then they're a little calmer and they're easier to sort of work with. And so working on sort of getting that walk in, and in the wintertime when we lived in cold Sugar City, Idaho, where it was 30 below, probably not 30 below, but below zero for probably the whole month of January. Just the act of getting them in their snow gear and running them down the street and back and getting them back was enough, because it exhausted them. Getting in their snow gear was exhausting for me. But, sort of doing that in the wintertime was super helpful. So I tried to make sure, even when it was super cold, they were at least outside some of the time. A lot of Waldorf is sort of centered around movement, and even in the schools where they're, in Germany and Switzerland, all of those places where where they are really cold a good portion of the year, they're still outside. And so I always tried to make sure that they had that outside time. And I didn't have to venture out that much. That's not my favorite thing. That's why I moved to San Diego. See, like, it's pretty outside today. I moved to San Diego so that I don't have to worry about that. But we always sort of went out regardless of the weather. So I would sort of put that as part of your morning routine. And maybe that means you have to start the day earlier. We've always sort of started at 8, but this last year, because Ellie goes to a class at 6 in the morning, she's home by 7, we're usually starting around 7:30, just because she likes to get things done, Sam wants to get done. So it actually is super helpful that we're starting that much earlier. So I would sort of look at everybody's schedule, look at your temperaments, look at what you've got going on in your house, and maybe you've got an older child that needs some longer math, because once they're in 6th grade and up, math takes about an hour a day, just for math. So I would definitely plan that in there, and sort of work to make sure that you can do that. So if you've got a child that will get up early, then work on that math when they're up, when everything else is sort of quiet. So really looking to order your day and look at each child. You know, I've always had to look at which children could do things on their own and which children really needed me by them. And that was super helpful. When we were working with 4 main lessons a day and a toddler, I was still doing all of the teaching. Eric wasn't doing any teaching. He was editing books, editing Thinking, Feeling, Willing, doing things like that, and working on filming stuff. So he was not doing any of the teaching. He didn't start doing teaching until this year, and I am so glad I finally really, and he helped in there, here and there, because he did help with, he did do the math. He did the math with the boys. Ellie prefers to do math with Mom. I don't know what that's all about, but the boys really liked doing math with Dad, and so he did math with the boys from 6th grade up. But other than that, he's not really been involved in like super day-to-day main lessons until recently. And in February, when we had to rebuild our site, I was like, okay, that's the only way it's going to get done is if you're doing my lessons. So we had a big family meeting and everybody's buy-in, and so it was easy for us to do it. And it was, you know, it was a challenge for him. And so one of the things he's going to be doing this summer is learning how to draw with block crayons, and he's going to learn how to knit, and he's going to learn all of those things, because if we're interchangeable, then we both have to be able to have the same skill set. And so he does a lot of planning with me, and he always has, just so he knows what's going on, but now it's going to this deeper level. So, you know, obviously not everybody's got our situation. We both work from home with the same business, so we have things that I need to do and things that he needs to do, and that sort of allows us to sort of rotate who's teaching. But you know, in regular situations when it's just you, like I said, the year that I had 4 main lessons and a toddler, it was just me, and so I really worked to order the way that we did things, and that was probably one of our best years, because I felt like, you know, the year before I had 3 main lessons, a preschooler, and a baby. So, you know, that was still a tough year. So this year, where I've only got like 3 main lessons, and one of them's an up-and-coming kindergartner, it feels kind of weird, because I'm used to doing so much. I'm used to doing so many more children. And so it's kind of nice then when they sort of get to a place where they're moving out of the house and they don't need you as much. It's nice main lesson-wise. It's sad for me because I really miss my boys. But it's a good thing. So I would really get good, especially if you've got 4 or 5 kids, if you've got 9 kids, you know, let's talk, because I really have worked with a lot of families that have, you know, a lot of children, and doing the rotation thing works. One of the things that was really helpful was we were using the chalkboard a lot then, and so I took a whole wall in our house and I painted it with chalkboard paint from about 3 feet up off the floor to almost the ceiling, and that allowed me to sort of segment off the chalkboard so that I had a chalkboard for each child. I'm not using the chalkboard as much. I've been doing a lot of main lesson drawings on really big, like it's like 12 by 14 paper, and so that's been super helpful. But if you've got room for a chalkboard, you know, and you don't have it up on the wall, get several smaller ones, and you can get that chalkboard paint at like Home Depot, and it works really well. I usually buy the black because the colors show up a lot better on the black than they do on the green. And that's so super helpful. And then, you know, do what you've got, you know, use what you've got, and don't feel like you have to have everything perfect like it is in the classroom. This is at home, and I've never, ever, in all of my years of homeschooling with Waldorf, have I sort of done the, oh no, it's not like the school. I look at the school model for everything, and then I go back to Steiner's notes, because the school doesn't always follow Steiner. I go back to Steiner's notes and the things that he said, and then I make my own plans at home. All of our curriculum is based that way. It's based on Steiner's exact work, not on what they do in the North American schools, and definitely not, you know, not on anybody else's curriculum. I mean, it's definitely based on Steiner. So, you know, I always sort of go through and look at that. And in our curriculum, we always give references for different things. And so if there's ever a reference that you want and you're not seeing it there, please just drop us a note, and, you know, I'll find you the reference for it. So we really try to stick to his work, because one of the things that's really cool about Steiner is he started off being a tutor. So he started off being a homeschooler. And so I love a lot of his early work because he talks a lot about development, and he talks a lot about, sort of how he worked things. And then you can see it progress as the schools got more popular, and he'd been doing it for a while. And so I look at both things, and I pull from it what I really think that we need here at home. And one of those things is we do handwork every day, and they don't do that in the schools because they can't. Sometimes they get, depending on the school, they'll get a handwork period every day, but often they get like a double period twice a week, and then on those other days they're doing something else. I prefer, and I had a handwork retreat last year with some handwork teachers that are teachers in Waldorf schools, and I just was talking to them. I said, do any of your students continue to knit and crochet when they go home? And a lot of them were like, I don't know. I mean, some of them were like, oh yeah, I keep in contact with these kids, and I taught them how to knit, and they're still doing it. And some of them were like, I don't know. And for me, as a homeschooler and as a mom, I want to give them skills that they're going to use their whole lives. I want to give them skills that they're going to remember how to use. And so, I love the fact that my boys know how to sew, and that they know how to knit, and they know how to crochet. It was really funny. A few years ago, they were at a scouting event, and they were doing some blankets. You can make these blankets out of recycled. It's not recycled. Grocery bags that they were recycling into blankets. And so they would cut them into strips, and they were great blankets, and they're really insulated for the homeless. And so we have quite a huge homeless population here in San Diego, and so they were making these blankets. And so Harry went to Scouts, and he was like, Mom, I was the only one who knew how to crochet. Everybody else had to learn how to crochet these things, and I had so much fun. And so he had these skills. He's sort of funny because he's on a mission for our church, and he took a knitting project with him, and he's been knitting this scarf that's the weather of the day. And so they take these skills with them. And in Harry's case, he has Asperger's, and knitting, once he got it, knitting was always super comforting for him. Whenever we had family meetings or we did our morning scripture time together, having him knit was super helpful because it sort of kept him from being fidgety. So if you've got a fidgety kid that's learning how to knit or can knit, bring those materials with you wherever you need to go. Like, we took knitting in the car, kept him from picking on somebody else. We always took it to appointments. When we had gymnastics and they had to rotate out classes, I always took it there. We always made sure that we took things like that to help support him, because him being the one with special needs meant that my attention was going to have to be on him if he wasn't otherwise occupied. So I always try to make sure that I had something that he could do, that he was confident in, that was then helpful to calm him. And so that's something that you learn as you're parenting special needs kids. And sometimes it takes a while to figure it out. Like Soraya, she loves to weave. She loves it. And it calms her. And so, think about handwork as a calming element for those kids. And if you're struggling teaching it to them, find somebody else to teach it to them. Because if you're really struggling and you have a lot of angst about it, then they're going to have angst about it. So, take a deep breath. Make sure that you have your skills down really well so that they can then learn from you, because you are the expert. And if you don't, then wait to teach them until you do. Wait to teach them knitting until you can cast on, knit really well, and cast off. And then while they're learning to knit, then you need to start purling and learning other stitches. So that way you can bring them to them. And you've got to work on your handwork like every day. And I do that. I have, even if I only knit one row, I do it every day. And that keeps me sort of going. And, after I had my stroke, just a fun fact, and then we're just about done here. After I had my stroke 2 years ago last week, was my 2-year anniversary, and I had all these doctors, and the neurosurgeon had me in the hospital, and then a few weeks after I was out of the hospital, and then 6 months later, and he's like, what are you doing? You're doing something that is knitting your brain back together. And I started laughing. I said, well, I'm knitting. He said, are you kidding me? I said, no, I'm not kidding you. I am knitting. I knit a ton. I do a ton of not just knitting but crocheting, but knitting was the mainstay then, because even though I could do other things, knitting was what felt very calming and soothing to me, and it still does. That's how I keep my cleric self from freaking out on people. I make sure that I have knitting with me all the time. It calms me, it soothes me, and it helps me sort of get to a place of, okay, what's going on around me does not matter. So, okay, there's a question here. I'm going to comment about the fact that I know how to crochet, but teaching the art is a whole different story. It's odd to be teaching it, and it would be so awkward. It feels weird at first, but watch some of our videos where we teach children, because I like to use kids' hands when I do it. So when we taught knitting, when we did the knitting video, I had Ellie's hands. When we did the crocheting video, I had Ellie teaching Jacob, which that was kind of crazy, but it worked. And so seeing how kids' hands work and how they move is really helpful. I am a lefty, and so I crochet everything backwards, and that's not how I would suggest that you teach a lefty. I would suggest you teach a lefty the right-handed way, but I learned the left-handed way, and dang, it's really hard when you're old to sort of change things. But I had Ellie teach Sam. I have him go, I teach him the stitches, but she taught him the basics. She taught him single crochet. And once he had single crochet down really well, then it was easy for me to teach him double crochet and triple crochet and those sorts of things. So, making sure that they're taught by somebody who feels confident in what they're doing, I think is really important. If you don't feel confident, they'll know. And that's when you find that they are struggling more. When you can be calm and confident about something, you can go, oh, okay, you made a mistake. That's all right. Let's pick it up and move it and change it. And with knitting, I did a lot of hand-over-hand stuff for a long time. Them holding the stuff and me holding their hands, me sort of standing behind them. So that way they could, they could feel the motion of the needles. And thankfully there's no left-handed knitting because that would have been messed up if there was. So anyways, I am going to close this video today. I really am excited to do this video series. So next week I'm going to sort of talk about life with a 5-year-old and a preschooler and sort of what things that we've done. But I also want to hear what other things you guys want to learn. I want to keep these videos fairly short. I know this one's gone like 20 minutes long, but I want to keep them fairly short so that they can be bite-sized nuggets that you can take with you, and they're always here on the Waldorf Essentials with Melissa Nielsen timeline, so it's easy to sort of find them. And anyway, that's it. I hope you guys have a great Monday. It's the start of a new week. Have a great week. I hope the weather is awesome where you are, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks. Bye now.